Hello, hello. For some reason, it doesn't look like I'm streaming on Substack yet. Just give me 1 second. Ah, that's why. It should start here on Substack in a second. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Sick of This Show, the Intelligent Masculinity series. My name is Nick Parrow. I'm not your dad. This is Sick of This Shit Publications. And I'm joined by my friend, Army veteran, co-host on and creator of the Anti-Fascist Book Clubs, Veterans Fighting Fascism, Task Force Butler, a whole bunch of things, Nazi hunter, famous anti-fascist Kristofer Goldsmith. How are you today, man?
I'm doing well. How you doing, brother?
It's a day. I didn't feel so well this morning, so I took the time off. But I'm glad I did because I was able to rest a little before the show and clear my head up, and I feel a lot better this afternoon. So I'm excited. How have things been for you? And do you mind introducing yourself just a little bit on top of what I said there for your quick intro before we get into anything?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Chris Goldsmith, founder of Task Force Butler and Veterans Fighting Fascism. We train veterans to conduct open source intelligence research historically into neo-Nazi organizations. Now that kind of open source intelligence is being used to find accountability for ICE agents who are murdering people on the streets of the United States, which is not where I plan for my nonprofits to go, but that's the world we live in. I'm also a co-host of the Find Out podcast. I have my own podcast called On Offense with Chris Goldsmith. And the focus of this is to convince people to get away from the 10 years of kind of like hashtag resistance, defend democracy thing,
Mm-hmm.
and to go on offense, to impose costs on the opposition, legal, social, and economic costs to make it expensive to be a fascist. So the Anti-Fascist Book Club is the big project of Veterans Fighting Fascism. It is a literal instruction manual on how to get locally organized. You can start just by yourself with a space at a library. Even better if you start with a group of local friends or family, or just people in your local Facebook group who are politically like-minded, because fascism is not just in Washington, D.C. It's in your backyard. It's in your school boards. It's, trying to burn books in front of your library. We have reached that point of fascism. So I want to encourage folks to check out veteransfightingfascism.org if you want to learn about the Anti-Fascist Book Club. If you want to start your own, you don't have to be a vet. It's just our name.
Awesome. You do a lot of really awesome work, and I appreciate what you're doing. So thank you for everything that you're doing. I know we've gotten to know each other over the last few months through all of this, and your teachings and what you're advocating for have come across really clearly for me. And I know I reached out because I knew how important it would be to start our own book club and do it virtually and give people a guide to it. So thank you, Chris, for joining me and supporting the Banner and Backbones Anti-Fascist Book Club, our virtual version. It means a lot to me that I get to do it with you. Having the founder there is kind of cool. And getting to just have those clubs and talk about it and express some of our fears, but also work through them, talk about the different learnings. We're finishing up Strong Men this week by Ruth Ben-Ghiat, which has been a really, really timely discussion, I think, on our part in a lot of things. And I think a lot of it is really timely, unfortunately, because we don't want to be there and we don't want these timely things. But today's more about the masculinity side than, say, some of the other work. However, I know your work ties directly into masculinity in a lot of ways, both the Find Out podcast, but also the On Offense portion of it. And yeah, as somebody said in the chat today, and every day is a great day to fight fascism. And you do that, like Chris, you said, on the local level, but also on the national level and on the personal level. And right now, this series is about the personal level. So introduction for me for this one is, Welcome everyone to the Intelligent Masculinity series based on some really straightforward questions, but learning what it means and redefining and reclaiming masculinity and reconstructing in a lot of ways what masculinity is. And so I've been bringing together some amazing folks, Chris Goldsmith on this list of folks who are showing and practicing intelligent masculinity in my eyes on a daily and a lived basis. And so I want to highlight their successes, see where they've come from, and learn from them because it helps me grow. It helps other men grow. And to be honest, guys, we're the problem. Men, we're the problem right now. So it's on us to fix it. And Chris is doing that. So, Chris, thank you for being with me. I'm going to try and keep short on some things because we only have about an hour, and I'm going to try and keep on time today. I'm a rambler. And so let's get into it. Before we get into it, if anyone notices in the top right hand corner, really cool announcement before we get too far into the show. Sick of the Shop is now open and available. If you go to that QR code in the top right hand corner of the screen, there is an automatic 20% discount enabled for this first week. So thank you so much to my volunteer support and community for being such an amazing part of getting this launched and up for me. So thank you, everyone. And let's get into it. And yeah, we are part of the solution. Thank you. That means a lot. That's what we're trying to do, is be part of the solution. Going on offense means being part of the solution. And so, Chris, let's jump into it a little bit here.
Yeah.
My first big question, and this is a two-part question in the end, but my first big question for you is, who has been one of the most influential masculine figures in your life and why? And it does not have to be for a positive reason either.
I think one of the most masculine, one of the greatest influences in my life is has not been stereotypically masculine. Uh, is my first real mentor, and I mean like mentor who called himself my mentor. Like we had a relationship like that. This guy named Chuck Cotolo. He was the lawyer for the community college that I attended, and he is the person who professionalized my advocacy. Um, I got involved in veteran advocacy and eventually went on to work at one of the largest veteran service organizations in the country in Washington, D.C., on their policy staff. The way that I got to that level, to the point that I was writing and advocating for and successfully passing legislation that would impact millions of veterans, was because I started off with a sob story. I, had been kicked out of the military with a less than honorable discharge due to a suicide attempt that the military, the Army, treated as an act of misconduct. This was back in 2007, before PTSD was really part of the American lexicon and before people really understood what it was, what it looked like, especially people in the military. And more often than not, people who exhibited symptoms were accused of misconduct. So in my case, that meant that I lost the GI Bill. So it was a struggle to get into school. Thankfully, I got out in a way that, and the guy who saved my life is actually in the comments right here, Stephen Atchison. Thank you, buddy.
That's awesome.
It took me 5 years of being in a dark hole, but I was able to get VA healthcare, which is what saved my life and allowed me to not just not just recover, not just stay alive, but to move forward. And that was the hardest part. Is going from stuck to moving was the hardest part. So one day, I talked about, in my Student Veterans of America Club, something that I wanted to achieve, passing a law to make it so that vets like me who were kicked out for undiagnosed mental health systems would have a fair chance at earning back their benefits through proving that they have a medical diagnosis and that they were inherently honorable throughout their service, as I was, and now as my documents accurately reflect. And I happened to tell someone who worked at the school what I had been through, who was friends with this lawyer at the school, and he came down and talked to me. And he's kind of got like the ultimate dad joke type of attitude and personality. He goes, that's a real shame, and there ought to be a law. And conveniently, I write laws for a living. So
Convenient there.
yeah, so he had been a senior aide for a legislative counsel for Senator Carl Levin, who at the time was the Senate Armed Services Committee chairman. So he told me how to become an advocate or a lobbyist from the perspective of someone who had been lobbied for 20 years. And I set foot in Washington as a professionalized advocate for the first time in January of 2013 or 2014, after years of going down there with a mohawk and being angry and not very effective.
It happens.
And I went down there in January, and by December, I had my first piece of legislation signed into law by President Obama.
That's awesome.
With Republicans in Congress leading, Democrats and Republicans on either side of the chamber leading the effort, which was incredible. So this is a guy who, is a physically small man who, went to Columbia University, is stereotypically kind of nerdy. I don't know why, but for some reason, everyone in his life buys him Kermit the Frog. It like started as a joke. And now his entire office is filled with Kermit the Frogs. And it takes someone who's very comfortable in their masculinity to be that person, to not hide, what might be embarrassing to other folks. So Chuck Cotolo, that's your answer. That's the example of positive masculinity that has had the greatest influence on my life.
I think that's really amazing. And one, you got a lot of love during that in the chat, especially on the Substack side about the suicide attempt or the suicidal ideations and the hurt. And I can 100% empathize with you, because I know what being at that low of lowest points really feels like. Like, it's fucking awful. And having someone there that helped you through it is amazing. And I'm really glad that you've had such a positive mentor in your life. I appreciate one of the things you said too there about his masculinity and the way that you see it is that he wasn't a physically imposing figure. It's not about his physicality or his dominance. Can you talk a little more on that, on like some of the lessons you've learned about defending or going on offense? Because that's one of the big things you talk about. And I think this is a great shift in the Intelligent Masculinity series itself is we've established the thesis behind it, what it means, what intelligent masculinity, at least as an overarching theme, means, and what some of the philosophical principles behind it are, like discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you have a really forward-thinking focus on how do you be on offense for your values or for a system rather than waiting for something to happen. Can you talk about how you were influenced from that masculine role model about being on offense for your values and what that means to you?
So the thing that Chuck said to me, half jokingly, there ought to be a law, and he knows how to write them and get them passed. That is an exertion of power in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the stereotypical and the toxic masculinity is an expression of power based off of your body, your physicality, your willingness to do violence. But, Andrew Tate and his ability to get punched in the face a bunch of times, like that doesn't stand up to the ability to get 500 lawmakers to commit to signing a piece of legislation that will potentially move billions of dollars, which they have to answer to their many, combined hundreds of millions of constituents, right? That is real power. And I think the way that I think of power in my own life is this constant fight for justice. I'm obsessed with it. I have it tattooed on my arm. I have Lady Justice right there. Um, and I have both exhibited and felt deeply like the worst kind of versions of this. Back in shortly after I got out of the military, I was, you know, if I saw a man in a bar do something that made a woman uncomfortable, like we were going outside and things were getting violent, right? That is not the kind of good justice, right? But the
Mhm.
justice that I want to fight for today are things like equality and bringing people to justice through lawful means, which is frankly a lot harder than dragging someone out of a bar, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of discipline, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of energy to put a neo-Nazi in jail for threatening someone or for, you know, uh, destroying a Black Lives Matter monument, right? It takes a lot of energy and a lot of discipline to do that. Be much easier, I find these people's addresses as I'm doing research on these Nazis. Be much easier for me to go and deal with it physically, right?
Yeah.
But the discipline thing and the just thing, in my view, is to work within our system of laws, to influence those systems of laws, and to influence those who are empowered to act, um, namely the state, to influence the state and make it act in a way that people want them to and expect them to.
I appreciate a lot the focus that you have on legal outcomes and legal changes. Because one of the things you said is write laws, and legality changes over time,
Mhm.
and we can change what legality means and what is socially acceptable by the state or not. And it sounds like the offense that you focus on in a lot of ways is how do we influence that and move forward. And
Yeah.
that seems to be a lesson you learn really well from Chuck.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are so used to focusing on who's breaking the rules, who's bending the laws, who's breaking the laws. I mean, everything in politics right now is about how the Trump administration is breaking the law or, you know, taking the spirit of the law out of the law and
Yeah.
applying it incorrectly. Threatening to charge Don Lemon and other independent journalists with the FACE Act, the Freedom of Access to Clinics Act, Clinic Entrances Act, right, which is meant to protect a woman's right to get health care. That is what
Yeah.
the intention of the law, which also does have a provision that protects people's First Amendment right for to practice their religion. Yes, that is part of the law, but it is not meant to be applied to silence journalists, right? So that's the thing that gets all of the attention. you know, People have become so used to, in the Trump era, seeing someone who, if they don't like the rules, they just break them.
Yeah.
I'm of the type that if I don't like the rules, I want to build a movement to change the rules, because that is, instead of just forcing things using whatever strength or privilege or power I have to break things and to, act with impunity. That's not my goal. My goal is to build a movement of people, and to pass legislation. It takes a movement.
Yeah.
A lobbyist doesn't work on their own for the most part, especially in the veterans world. Defense industry, maybe that's different. That's just money. Um, but to build a movement to get people to agree with you is much more long lasting than anything you ever gain from breaking rules.
I really like that. And I like the focus on, because I want to fix the system too. Like, my goal is to fix the American system and make it better for everybody, because there are parts that are good, there are parts that are really bad, and we need to fix the really bad parts and face that accountability on them and be able to move forward. And that takes changing laws. So we've talked a lot about the masculine figure in your life with Chuck there, and that he gave you a lot of really good influence on discipline, on focus, on how to be on offense.
Mhm.
Who has been the most influential feminine figure in your life, and why, on the other end of that spectrum?
My mom. Just the unconditional love. Now that's we're stereotyping here, right? I'm talking about masculinity in terms of projecting power and talking about feminine. I can't say the fucking word. You know what I mean? Feminine. Nope, can't do it.
Femininity.
Yeah.
There's a lot of in in there.
And as you know, as love, right? But what both of these things are, and the things that I focus on are protection. They're protecting people. Love is, wrapping your arms around somebody and protecting them from harm, protecting them from, whether it's physical or insult or injury or whatever, right? Um, I have in my life not always been a good person. I was driven by hate and ignorance. I can say that retrospectively. I didn't think I was at the time, but um, you know, I was a New Yorker. I was 16 years old on 9/11, and being totally honest, that attack made me extremely racist and extremely anti-religious, not just anti-Islam, but like I hated everyone who cared about religion because I felt religion was the reason for all of the violence and all of the destruction and death. That that hate and in going to war, being driven in part, not exclusively. I was a Boy Scout too, and just like the idea of service, but being driven by hate to go want to kill the enemy. I don't think that I was a good person. Um, a lot of people out there would think that, oh, going and killing terrorists, that makes you a man, that is good, that is just, that is patriotic. It's not really that way. Um, and I came home and I was really fucking broken. I was at the bottom of a bottle every chance I got. I spent every dollar that I made in Iraq, which was not a lot because I was lower enlisted and wasn't collecting BAH. I think it was like 18 or $19,000 for a year of my life, tax free, but not a lot of money.
No, not a lot.
Less than minimum wage, maybe. Um, I
It
spent
it it is if you actually, ooh, as I throw shit. It is if you actually calculate it out to 24/7, because that's what you are for on duty.
yeah,
It's like 60 cents an hour or some
yeah.
shit. It's
So
stupid.
so I spent I saved every dollar that I made in Iraq, and then I spent it all within months of being kicked out of the army, just
Yeah.
going to the bar and just blowing hundreds of dollars all the time. And I lived at home, back in my childhood bedroom, and I was a mess. I was terrible to live with, and despite all of that, um, the only thing that my mother ever did was protect me. She Within months of me getting out, gave me a tough ultimatum of either go to the VA and pursue collecting disability, which I didn't think I deserved at the time because I was like self-loathing. She's like, you either go and start collecting disability so that you can pay rent and support your lifestyle, or you have to get out. And that was an inflection point that put me on a very long road to recovery.
I I have found that it's really important to have someone in your life who is willing to put a boundary down, and say no, or draw a line in stone rather than in sand,
Hmm.
and say, this is it. If you cross it, you have to do something to fix yourself. It's no longer a me problem, it's a you problem.
Hmm.
And I'm glad that you had your mom to be able to do that, and you love your mom and respect her in a way, because you have to respect the person that says that to you at some point to be able to respond back to it. And from the way you speak about it, you very much respect your mom and what she taught you. And I think that's really important, because both sides of this discussion, being an intelligently masculine man is not about masculinity only. It's better humaning, which requires all sides of the art of the spectrum and all sides of what we would consider in a binary system of masculinity or femininity. But it's a scale, and it doesn't matter where you fall on, as long as you fall somewhere on it. And so, with that, I want to move on to our next question, because you've talked a lot about the influences and how you've gotten here and what it looks like in your life to be, say, on offense for your values, and how you learned from the experiences that you have gone through. In your eyes, and I have a thesis and a definition that I'll read after yours so I don't taint your answer. Um, is what, in your eyes, would be the definition or a definition of the concept of intelligent masculinity?
It would be the willingness to learn from from your mistakes. In my experience, um, I can say that I was foolish in thinking that the world would change for the better, right? Towards justice without me being a participant in forcing that change. Um, and I went from that, being stuck thinking that the world is just going to change and eventually things will be right, to thinking that I could just be fucking belligerent and scream and yell, literally like scream and yell with a fucking mohawk in Washington D.C., like yelling at members of Congress, testifying before Congress, making members of Congress cry. I thought like that kind of aggression is going to change the world. Um, and it took experience and a lot of failure to learn how to shape the little power that I had, and um, to morph it into something that was more effective, that didn't cause harm to people. Um, there's a difference between sharing a sob story and using that to motivate people to change, and trauma dumping on someone and expecting them to be able to get up and do their job, which is not that the first few years that I was going to the halls of Congress and talking to staffers, I was like, "Oh, well, if I make them cry, I've done a good job because then I know they care." Um, that was not effective at all, and I feel bad for causing people harm that way, and in just sharing the absolute, like, most vulgar things that have ever happened to me, in war and at home. Um, so yeah, I hope I answered your question there.
No, I think you answered it really well. And it your thought on it fits well into the thesis that I've come to around this, and the idea that I've come to, which is intelligent masculinity is the refusal to outsource accountability onto others, and the discipline to live with the consequences of your values and actions, be they good consequences or bad consequences, the discipline to live with them.
Mhm.
And from the experiences that you're talking about and where you've come from to where you are now, you have lived with various consequences throughout your life, from the less than honorable discharge originally to now not having that on your record. And you fought for your values in various ways, sometimes really destructive, it sounds like, other times, and a lot more, it sounds as you've grown recently, into actionable and meaningful and constructive, like understanding of how to discuss situations and how to bring up your story and what has happened to you in life. And I just want to say that's incredible, and that's a really good growth. And I think it should be celebrated, is that you have grown from your experiences over time, and you are embodying this idea of intelligent masculinity, whether that's how you defined it or not, up until this point. Like, what you've defined before fits in with what I've been finding across the spectrum for men, is as we want to be more masculine and more intelligent about it and express ourselves in better ways. It's this reflectiveness that we have come to learn and understand that is really like, it's a stop, and that just moment of hesitation, but not in a hesitant, like, I'm worried that what I'm going to do is wrong, but that moment of pause for clarity for self. And
Mhm.
so, thinking on like this idea of moment of clarity, or like pausing, is I like to talk about, you and I have both gone through therapy at the VA. You and I have both experienced individual therapies. I believe you've gone through group therapies. I won't speak for you on that, but I'm assuming
I
you
have.
have.
Yep.
Um, and I think we've both learned some of the same techniques and therapy lessons around like mindfulness and how we think about our emotion mind versus our intelligent mind, and where we fall into what's called the wise mind. And to me, that's a lot of self reflection and self evaluation.
Mhm.
So, how do you in your life take the opportunity to self reflect and self evaluate, to better your day or better yourself, and learn and continue to grow?
2 years ago, uh, around this time of year, almost exactly 2 years ago, I was in the process of shutting down both of my nonprofits, Task Force Butler Institute and Veterans Fighting Fascism. Despite being an incredibly effective organization bringing justice in the form of multi-billion-dollar lawsuits, multiple neo-Nazis getting locked up because of the research that we did, and cooperating with both plaintiffs who had been harmed by these extremist groups and with law enforcement. Despite how effective we were,
Nope,
Nick
that was
disappeared
weird.
for a sec. So despite how effective we were, we couldn't get any fundraising.
Yeah.
There, we just I couldn't pay my I hadn't paid myself at that point in something like 6 or 7 months. I had been paying what was left of my staff out of pocket for a few months before I ran out of money and couldn't do that anymore. And um, I reached a point where I physically and mentally and emotionally couldn't work for months. I in May of 2024 did an intensive outpatient thing for was it 2 weeks? I think it was 2 weeks, in Boston, and that was a big reality check for me. I had gone from, feeling like a failure, getting kicked out of the army, spending 5 years drunk in a black hole, to going to, starting to recover, going to community college, getting into Columbia University, graduating with honors, passing a bunch of laws, working for a major veteran service organization, becoming a national figure, before I got involved in this like social media stuff. And I thought that, and I was doing objectively good and important work, but I was so focused on fighting for justice that I forgot to take care of myself at all. Like, when I reached the point when I was paying my staff out of pocket, I should have started folding things up then. I should have said, like, I can't not take care of myself and continue to live, under constant threat of literal murder.
Yeah.
um, under constant threat of my family being exposed to violence or other terrible things because of my work, right? Um, it it was a big it was a tough thing to try to learn that I needed to take time off, that I needed to focus on myself, that I needed to prioritize myself, and that I couldn't survive if the only thing that I did was fight for other people, for justice for other people, and completely ignored my own well-being. Um, I spent, the following year in still pretty rough shape, but starting to recover, starting to be able to work again, eventually getting back up to full time. But it wasn't until after my daughter was born last May that I had something external that forced me to focus on myself much, 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 much more, because um, I could no longer expose myself to certain risks. I could no longer um, expose myself, make myself so vulnerable to going bankrupt. I had to diversify my sources of income. That is why I'm doing this social media thing instead of just hunting Nazis, in front of a computer screen 24 hours a day. Um, it's why I started doing Substack and TikTok and YouTube and, you know, started focusing less on my nonprofits and more on my business. For so long, I felt like that was selfish, that if I put myself first, I would be selfish. But what the last almost 9 months since my daughter was born has taught me is that focusing on myself has allowed me to do more good while creating less risk for myself and for those around me. And I'm
So
40 years old. Took me 40 years. Took me half a lifetime to learn these lessons.
I mean, I'm 36, so I'm not too far behind you. It took a while to learn a lot of these lessons. Um, and I'm glad you brought up the birth of your daughter. I was going to ask about that, in fact, because we're both dads. We're both girl dads. Mine is older than yours at this point, and I have one of each. And you have a girl.
Mhm.
And we live in a society right now that is really fighting hard on one side to be anti-women and anti-choice for girls. How has the how has becoming a father, maybe in general, but specifically because you are a girl dad at this point, is how has that impacted your decisions on self-reflection and evaluation so you know what work is most important and how you prioritize yourself in that work too?
I'm sorry, could you say that? Could you start the question over again?
Yeah, yeah. How do you use the growth, or how have you grown since becoming a father to work that component of into your self-reflection and evaluation when you're making decisions around like what is important for you to focus on? Like, where do you put how do you put your how has becoming a dad changed your focus on where you put your energy, like towards work, towards home, towards yourself? What has that internalized for you to help you grow?
Um, I think that it has made me more protective uh, of myself in a way that like I just explained, I used to think of this as selfish,
Mhm.
and as in, like, one of my biggest things in therapy for nearly 20 years now has been this idea that I feel that people are inherently motivated by selfishness, by self-interest, and this is something that um, is like deeply offensive and upsetting to me on a level that uh, the closest thing that I can possibly compare it to is like almost like a religious conviction. Like this has become um, such a strong value for me that, on paper it sounds like good or honorable to be like obsessed with this idea of justice, but in actuality, like to live a life like this is actually pretty fucking tough. To be bothered by everything is like is not good. It's not healthy.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've constantly like had to fight. And in my anger that is projected outwards, um, I have subconsciously been afraid of that anger turning inwards. If I were to ever act in my own interest, putting myself first, putting my business first instead of my nonprofits first, right? Because the nonprofits, I haven't paid myself in years from them, right?
Yeah.
Like putting my business first just felt wrong. And having a tiny little human being whose life I am responsible for has helped me recognize that it is not inherently selfish to take care of yourself. And this is something that I think has always been easy for me to say and for me to admit, as this is logical, um, emotionally and intellectually. Like, yes, taking care of yourself is important, but accepting it on an emotional level,
It's very different.
truly accepting it, very, very different. And that's something that I'm still struggling with. But my daughter has helped me immensely with that.
Yeah. I think kids do that. I know when I first met my daughter, because she's my stepdaughter, but now my fully adopted daughter, is when I stepped into the role of actually being a dad, it changed my outlook on what I should be doing about myself, because I had another human being that was solely responsible, or I was mostly responsible for. Wasn't solely responsible
Mhm.
for, but at times there was sole responsibility, and at other times there was split partnership responsibility. And learning to be a parent effectively is a great way to be an intelligent man. There are a
Mhm.
lot of men out there who aren't good at parenting and who internalize that rage and then spew it out on their kids and their spouses. And both of us have been there to those points of masculinity, I think, where we have taken ourselves into the fragile, toxic masculinity. And we both admit that. Like, I have been a shitty man too at times in my life. Like, it's taken me a while to grow. One of those, shifting into our sort of end segment on this, is one of those things that has allowed me to grow is remembering that I have creativity and that it's
Mhm.
okay to be creative and it's okay to express my creativity. Uh, mm, we'll get to, maybe we'll do a dad joke. I don't know. Um, Chris has only been a dad for like 6 months, so he doesn't have a lot of practice. Is that I've allowed myself to go back to the creative side and express that creativity. And one of those things is being able to have some fun.
Mhm.
And one of those bits of fun is I wanted to do in this in this part of the series is a song, or part of a song that has sat well with me throughout my life. I was in choirs growing up, or when I was in high school, I got dared to join the men's choir, and I got in. And one of the songs we always sang was "I'll Make a Man Out of You." Through high school and college, from Mulan, it's sort of, in my eyes, at least from the like artsy side of the thing, was it's our clarion call. It's our "Let's Go Girls" for men.
Mhm.
And there's some really important lines in that song from the chorus around, in the at least in the video and in the movie, around at least physicality. But if you think about them from other aspects, they also apply. through mental and emotional strengths. And so I wanted to ask about the chorus to you, and four little sub questions that are a little bit more fun, a little more whimsical. And the last one is actually one of the hardest questions that there are. So first, how do you, or sorry, what does it mean to you to be as swift as a coursing river?
I got, full disclosure to everyone watching this, I got these questions in advance, and I've had like a week to think about them, and I'm still struggling. I think to be swift is to be decisive, um, to be confident, but not impulsive, and that is a tough balance, because impulsive is something that I was a lot for a long time, and and reeling that back in, learning to reel that back in, is a work in progress.
I like it. I like it. There's no wrong answer to these two, and I don't put any like pushback on them because it's fun to see where you guys go and where everyone comes out on these. Next, how do you embody the force of a great typhoon?
So this is another one that I've thought about for, I think, a week. A typhoon doesn't stand on its own. Typhoon or a hurricane doesn't stand on its own. It only exists because of its environment, and it only gets as strong as its environment, and as destructive as its environment. Um, Part of the fuel for hurricanes that can either be completely fucking devastating, to the United States, or can create really excellent fishing or surfing conditions that can be quite nice, for someone like me who likes to be on the beach. Um, is dust from the sands of Africa getting blown up into the atmosphere and um, helping to create condensation and clouds. Um, it starts with these microscopic, almost microscopic, particles, right? That is an a gust of wind. That, you know, with warm air, with moisture, with a current, um, can build over time into a massive storm. And that, I think, is how I see the arc of my life going uh, from a mess, a drunken mess in my childhood bedroom, to being the guy who came up with the budgetary trick to create the forever part of the forever GI Bill, so that anyone who's currently serving who earns the GI Bill will never have it expire, unlike my generation that had it expire arbitrarily after 15 years.
Yeah.
Um, so I might be one speck of dust, but collected with a bunch of others, building a movement, resulted in something that pushed back against not just the VA, which is the second largest department in terms of employees and budget, but pushed the DoD, and then first the Obama White House and then the Trump White House. I have, as part of a movement, bullied two presidents into treating veterans better, and so yeah, that's what it means to be strong, or whatever. Like
With the force of a great typhoon, you were able to impact in a positive way for millions of veterans medical benefits and education benefits. And I'm a beneficiary of the policies that Chris helped get through. Like, Chris has done a lot of good personally for me without him ever knowing it. And I appreciate all the work. And I never knew how much you did on all of those things. And I do want to thank you. Like,
well, thank you.
the VA is I've been able to use my GI Bill, and it got got me my second college degree, and I've been able to use the VA the way I have, and it has saved my life. And Chris, you're a part of that, and I thank you for it. Like, I'm
Well, thank
glad
you.
I'm here, and I'm glad you're here, and have made the decisions that you did to grow, because it has done a lot of good. And I hope that brings you some joy too, is to know that you are doing good and you have done good, and it has impacted so many people in such a great way. So also continue doing that work. You're doing it. You have always done, since I've met you, you've always done a really good job pushing forward. And I really like that quality about you, and the way that you just continue to move and you're continuing to grow. So thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Um,
The respect is absolutely mutual. It has been
Thank you.
really cool to see you grow this platform to be one of one of the most, if not the most, consistent producers of healthy content in my feed, which is pretty fucking significant.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. That makes my day a lot. And I'm glad that it's getting through. And so we got two more questions left. Which is good. We've done this really well. I actually timed this pretty good today. I'm figuring this hosting thing out. Is our last two questions, the last two parts of the chorus, is how are you? So we've gone through swift as a coursing river, embodying the force of a great typhoon, and now how are you as strong as a raging fire?
Mm. Strong as a raging fire, I think, is, being channeling my stereotypically unhealthy masculinity, toxic masculinity traits into something that is, I think, objectively positive. I talked earlier about how I was filled with hate, and that is part of what motivated me to go to war and to be a forward observer, to be the eyes of the artillery, to blow people up a job that is mass murder, right? Objectively, like you drop a 155 millimeter round on a building, like that's mass murder. I didn't think about it that way when I was 18 and training for it, or when I was 19 or 20 in Iraq. But that is what it is, right? You take a bunch of lives with a radio call. Um, I am still that person. I am still filled with rage. I have just found a way to channel it in a way that is largely, not entirely, considered socially acceptable. Um, the whole Nazi hunting thing, there are more people who are upset about that today than there were, 4 or 5 years ago. Um, but I think
Which is a problem.
which is a
People should
major
be
problem.
people should be glad that you're a Nazi hunter, not upset about it.
Yeah. Um, it- so I think that the fire inside of me, that burning hatred that still exists,
Hmm.
was very destructive, and was based in ignorance and anger that was misdirected. I have learned to, take that, what could have been a forest fire, or a wildfire, just absolutely destructive and indiscriminate, and figured out a way to channel it into a hearth, or an oven, so that I could use it to create things, that I could use it, like an iron worker, takes scraps and make it into something useful, tool, that I could then use to accomplish and do other things, or that I could give to other people. That is what the Anti-Fascist Book Club is. Um, the Anti-Fascist Book Club is a result of anger that I have learned to channel. I fucking hate Nazis. And when I first came up with the idea, which was a total accident, I just did it on a TikTok video of creating the anti-fascist book club. It was in the context prior to Trump being president again. It was in the context before ICE was out there acting like Gestapo and kidnapping people, out of their homes and out of the streets, and disappearing people. It was before we had concentration camps in the United States in the way that we do today. That hate still exists. It will always exist. And I have learned to channel all of the power and the destructive force that exists inside of me into a way that is mostly objectively socially acceptable.
I think that's really awesome. And then let's get to our final question, which is the hardest of them, which is how do you allow yourself to maintain some mystery or be as mysterious as the dark side of the moon?
That is a really good question. I found out part of my recovery arc was, what I kind of dismiss as 5 years of darkness. I was still like working towards justice in that period. I was kind of doing the opposite. I was taking the mysteriousness of PTSD that people had, seen in headlines when people are getting arrested. That was kind of like when PTSD was getting coverage in 2007. It was in like suicide and people committing crimes. Those were the two things that earned press coverage, and that I think shaped the reality for a lot of people. I extinguished a lot of my own privacy and a lot of the mystery behind the way that I think and the things that I've done, the things that I've experienced by testifying before Congress, by sharing my experiences in a room full of hundreds of strangers with cameras from news agencies around the world. The first time that I ever shared my story of what I had been through in Iraq through or really what led me into Iraq, to everything I experienced there, to the suicide attempt and the way I was treated by the Army on the way out. The first time that I had ever told that story, period, was in public, in front of hundreds of people, in front of cameras from news agencies from around the world. So, I don't know that there's anything to me that is truly mysterious as the dark side of the moon. I think that as we're talking now, like I'm as close to fully transparent as I can possibly be. And it is, at first, I was doing it only for other people.
Mm-hmm.
But because I thought if I shared these things, it would improve other people who were suffering silently. But I have learned that it is actually also selfish. I'm also doing it for me. My experience with PTSD is like road rash. You fall off a motorcycle, you survive, you end up in a hospital. Your skin, might be gone in some places, and you will have gravel in those wounds. And what is going to happen over the course of days or weeks is some nurse who's tougher than you is going to come over with water and a brush, and they are going to scrub that wound to get that gravel out. And it is going to hurt worse than the original injury. That is what my PTSD recovery experience has been. But that first scrub brush is not it. Like, they've got to come back, maybe give you some x-rays to see if there's still stones in your body. They've got to come and continue to dissect you alive. But over time, the gravel gets out. The wound is still there, but it's starting to heal. It may just be hard scar tissue. And, if you have lovely tattoos that you love on your body, they may be gone forever.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, even though what grows back might be either completely numb or overly sensitive or a combination of both. Over time, you start to get used to it. You start to learn to live, to move on. And now I am at the point where there are flare ups. Like I said, 2 years ago, I was unemployable. I had to check myself in for an intensive outpatient for 2 weeks, right? There are flare ups, but mostly I'm rubbing vitamin E on it. I'm helping that scar fade and soften and become something that I have to focus on less, something that hurts less throughout the day.
I love it. I love that answer. I think that's one. I just want to say thank you for sharing all of your experiences. I know how difficult it can be to talk about some things and how um, important it is when we do, and impactful for ourselves. I do appreciate the fact that you are focusing on yourself and the fact that you are important in this whole process too, because that's one of the big things that I've found that we forget, that we don't like to talk about, or men don't ever talk about. Whereas our friend Sherrod Swaney over at Centered America said was, find a group of men that you can cry around. Make friends that are men that you can cry around. And relearning that skill is you taking care of yourself, is allowing yourself to feel and have emotions and emote properly and not destructively. And it takes time and it takes self awareness all the time. It's a discipline, it's not a single act. And Chris is a great example. You're a great example of what it looks like to live that discipline and live that process. And so I just want to thank you for being here with me and coming on and being a part of this discussion. And the conversation we had here is going to fuel more writing on this. Is one, there's going to be a post show write up that I do about you. It's a little bit of a profile in some of the things that we've talked about, but you're going to help fuel some of the further articles that are coming out on intelligent masculinity. And like I said, the next one coming out is discipline. Yours, the one that yours is going to highlight a lot, I think, is going to be on offense for masculinity. Fits you, but it also fits the theme. And so, as part of that, too, just in general, is I like to let my friends promote themselves and give themselves a chance to let other people know where they can find them, see their work, because sharing this work is caring, and growing this community. It's a community over, it's collaboration over competition. And Chris and I are two voices out of millions that can come up. However, his voice is incredibly potent in many, many ways, really well. He's sometimes known as the bad news fairy, but he's often just very blunt and direct and gives really quality, helpful commentary, and discussions on things. And when Chris posts something, I tend to restack it or share it because it's typically really important. And so, Chris, promote yourself, my friend, and all the work that you're doing. You've been an incredible example for me to help learn and grow on through the time that I've met you. And again, I just want to thank you. So
Thank you, brother.
it's been a great hour.
Yeah, it's a real privilege to be able to have this conversation with you. So thank you, Nick, for everything that you've built on this platform and for giving me the opportunity to prompting me to talk about these things in this way, because I most often am the bad news fairy. Most often I am telling people the hard truths about the state of the world that we live in. But I want to remind people the only reason that I'm still here is because I think we can win, and that is why I'm telling you how to go on offense. It's the whole point of everything I'm doing right now. So, if you want to support me, if you want to support my nonprofits or anything, you can find them all through On Offense, which is on your screen right now with the QR code. On Offense is going to become my primary focus moving forward as I start to build out the Valor Media Network, which is a platform by and for veterans who are fighting for democracy, not just defending it, but going on offense for it. So if you've got $8 a month to spare, that is what a paid subscription to On Offense is. And it gives you the complete catalog of everything that I've written on the platform. It's just over a year old. But if you don't have the money, being a free subscriber will help us stay in touch. You'll get everything that I publish anyway, because I publish everything initially for free. I can't stop myself from giving shit away from free, even though I'm not doing the nonprofit thing. But I am asking for your direct support. Supporting the nonprofits is nice and great, and I appreciate that. If you want a tax write-off, go for that. But if you want to support my living, the nonprofit's not the way to do that. That's On Offense. So I'm going to focus on promoting that, because I've learned my lesson. When everything goes to the nonprofits, I'm fucked.
Yep. Hey, you're practicing that self-reflection in real time, and I love it. So everyone, thank you so much. Chris, again, thank you for being here with me for this hour, for this really wonderful discussion. Please smash that heart one last time if you're on Substack or YouTube or Twitch or Facebook, whichever platform you are joining and listening in on with us for. Thank you all for being here. It's been an incredible discussion. You'll actually see me tomorrow for a rescheduled episode with the Opinionated Ogre on intelligent masculinity. Going to be another great discussion. But thank you, Chris, so much for today. Everyone, like I said, smash that heart. Let's keep going, because we're done being sick of this shit. And now we're doing this shit.